So I would like to officially welcome you to the NIH Grant Basics and Need to Know resource session of the NIH Grants Conference. My name is Cynthia Dwyer. I'm the coordinator of the NIH Grants Conference. And so I am very, very pleased to have you join us and to serve as your moderator for this event. I'm also honored to introduce you to our presenters for today. Both of them are very experienced in the NIH grants world. I know them, I've worked with them many, many years, and they both fully enjoy the opportunity to help guide our research community to finding the information that you need to succeed, whether it's in person at our events that we used to hold or virtually like we're doing today. So I would like to introduce you to Ms. Sherry Cummins. She's a communications strategist in the NIH Office of Extramural Research. And I'd also like to introduce you to Dr. Mike Sesma, who is the branch chief for the postdoctoral training division at NIGMS. So I am going to now take you on a little journey through my part of the presentation before you have the great opportunity to hear Sherry and Mike present. There you go. There we are right there. Sherry, I'm Cynthia, and Mike. So the first thing that we want to talk to you about is who we are. We are the largest public funder of biomedical research in the world. And I know when I started with NIH 20 years ago, I thought it was just NIH. There was an institute. I didn't realize that NIH is comprised of 27 different institutes. So it's the National Institutes of Health. So, and you're going to be learning a lot more as you go through some of these sessions. You're going to be hearing sometimes some of these slides might be repeated a bit, but it's our audience today, especially many are new to the NIH grants process, which you may be one of those. And so, so you might be hearing this over and over just to kind of help you hear different perspectives and really get to know us well by the end of the conference. So the NIH mission is to seek the fundamental knowledge about the nature and behavior of living systems, and then that application of knowledge to enhance health, lengthen our lives, and reduce illnesses and disability. So in fiscal year 2021, what were the numbers? Well, I'm happy to say that we funded almost 57,000 extramural grant awards, which totaled a little over $32 billion. And in doing that, we supported research at over almost 2,700 organizations. Oh, no, you're not. I see someone said in the chat that the slides are not popping up.
I'm seeing them change, Cynthia. I don't know.
Okay. Okay, others are saying, okay, good. Boy, I love that chat. Okay, so I'm not sure, it might be your, I'm not sure if it's your browser. You might want to go out and come back in if you're not seeing them. So thank you again for those of you who confirmed that they are working. So we have a lot to cover, and I've been talking a lot. So I'm going to kick this off with our questions of the day. Where do I start? Where's the funding? Where do I turn when I need help or advice? What funding opportunities are available, and where in the world do I go to find those? And what's the application process, and how long does it take, which is sometimes very surprising to those who are new to the process. So Sherry, this is all yours.
Thank you, Cynthia. And just a reminder, we do have the slides posted. So if you want to follow along that way, if you're having trouble, please do so. So this first question, where do I start? So the first place you're going to want to go is our grants.nih.gov website. We have just a wealth of information here. There is information in the, let me see if I can get this up. There you go. In the top right corner, you'll find some utility links. And I want to point this out right away, because if you're not fluent in NIH grant speak, and very few people are, then this glossary up here is going to be a very important resource for you. We put things in the glossary both by acronym and expanded out. So hopefully you'll be able to find them. And Lord knows we're adding things to that all the time. There's always new terminology coming around. So even if you aren't new to the grant process, that's a fabulous resource for you. We also have the FAQs as a utility link up there, and there are hundreds of FAQs out there. We are trying to make a concerted effort to go through them and clean them out, but there's just tons of information available to you. So check those out whenever you have a question before you reach out. It's always good to check online resources. And then we do have a help link up there too. And that's going to be very important because it's going to have pages there that'll talk to you about the roles. And Mike's going to go over the different NIH staff roles in a few minutes. But we have a page there that explains them and when you would reach out to each. We have a page that talks about central resources and how to get a hold of them, how to get a hold of our help desk. So those are some really handy utility links you're going to want to be aware of. We also have a link here to our How to Apply application guide, and that's going to be all the information that you need to know from a general perspective on preparing and submitting your grant application. So that's a great resource to be aware of. And we have this Find Grant Funding, which points to our NIH Guide for Grants and Contracts. And you're going to hear a lot about things being posted in that NIH Guide for Grants and Contracts. That's where we post our notices of policy. We post our funding opportunities. So it's important to be aware of how to get to that resource. And then finally, in these little quick links over here, we have a link to our report tools. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment, but that is a database of all of our funded research for literally decades. And you can go and you can search, see what we've funded before. We'll talk about how you can use some of those tools to identify potential institutes of interest and potential staff contacts. We have a whole section on about grants, and some of the slides that you'll see here, especially towards the end when we talk about process, are all laid out in that section of the website. And we also have links to all of our policy and compliance information, and that includes our some specific pages on different policies, as well as our grants policy statement. So we're going to talk about a lot of these resources throughout this session. You're also going to find the ability to, looks like I went one ahead. You'll find all sorts of resources in these sessions. You'll find resources online, and you can also check out our booths to learn more on this topic. All right, Cynthia.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to help get this situation. We've lost our ASL interpreter.
Oh, goodness.
And so, yeah, so thank you all for letting us know. So our next question is, where is the funding?
All righty. So Cynthia touched on this already, that we do have 27 institutes and centers, and 24 of them do have grant making authority. So each of these institutes and centers has its own mission, its own priorities, its own budget, its own funding strategy. And the vast majority of our policies and practices are going to apply across all of these institutes and centers. However, there is some variability between them. So a lot of the times you're going to want to be talking directly to the folks that are actually potentially funding your application or who have funded your grant. And so it's important to know which one of these institutes or centers is going to be appropriate for your area of research and who to reach. This graph that we have here with all the different institutes listed, there's a link here on the slide here to the NIH Institute Centers and Offices page on our nih.gov website, and you can learn all about each of those institutes there. Now, when we looked at that grants.nih.gov homepage, we saw that link to report, and that's this series of tools that we have, and one of them is called Reporter, that allows us to access all of that information on funded research. If you've never used Reporter before, and I highly encourage you to go out and spend some time there, there's a little bit of a time suck. You kind of get in there and you're like, oh, let me look over here and let me look over there, and all of a sudden, hours will go by, but it's time well spent. But go to that matchmaker tool, and you'll find that down here in the lower right corner. And if you click on that, you'll find that the interface for Matchmaker is really just a text box. And you can provide in that interface 15,000 characters that you can grab from an abstract, your specific aims, a write-up on your website, whatever it is that's going to kind of describe the project or what you're looking for a good match for. You drop that into that interface. And then the tool is going to do some matching to all the similar projects or the similar awards that have been made, okay? And when you get those results, you're going to see at the very top, we have some of these boxes here, these little graphs. And that allows you to further filter your results by institute center, activity code, or study section. So in this example, you can see that what we were looking at had a very strong match to our NIAID, or National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Okay, so if I went into this interface and I clicked on that bar right there in the graph, it would then filter down my results to just those projects that match NIAID. And you can do the same thing for activity code and study section. So it's a really powerful tool. It allows you to kind of drill down very quickly. Once you drill down into a reasonable number of excuse me, projects, you can actually click on those projects and look at the abstract. And then once you find the programs that might be of interest, you can even click over to a program officials tab, and that's going to give you folks like Mike Sesma and our program staff that would be able to talk to you about things that kind of match their portfolios will match what you were looking at there. So it's a really powerful tool. With just a few queries and a few clicks, you can identify potential institutes and staff contacts. We do have a 3-minute video that you can watch that'll go more depth into how to use Matchmaker, and I recommend you take a look at that. And also within our exhibit hall, we have 2 full rooms that have institute and center booths that you can go and talk to each one of those institutes and centers. Many of them have chats, some of them have one-on-ones, opportunities, and all of them have at least to leave a message. So if you don't find a way to reach them at the conference, you can get a hold of them later.
So I guess the next question you're going to be asked is where do I turn when I need help or advice, right? So Sherry just talked to you about how to reach people. I'm going to tell you about who we are over here. So the extramural team includes a program official or a program officer, a scientific review officer or SRO, and a grants management officer or grant specialist. So what do each of these people do? Well, the program official is a person who manages a portfolio of awards within the mission of a particular institute. We develop grant initiatives, but most important, we provide programmatic, scientific, and technical advice to applicants, and we monitor the progress of grantees once they get an award. What does the scientific review officer do? Well, they're a scientist like me, except their role is to manage the scientific and technical review of these applications. So their responsibility is to ensure fair and unbiased evaluation of scientific and technical merit of your application. And they provide a summary of that result from the review panel in what's called a summary statement. And that's what a program officer uses to make a determination about recommending the grant. So the program officer is the one you contact before you submit, and after the grant's been reviewed. The SRO is the person you contact while after you've submitted it and before the application has been reviewed. And the grants management officer is responsible for the completion of the business management requirements and of applications once their decision's been made about funding. So the explanations are here. We have other sessions that talk about the individual roles, and you should take a look at those. So let me toss it back to Sherry.
All righty. So what funding opportunities are available and how can I find them? All right. So funding opportunities, and you're going to hear a few different terms here. You might hear funding opportunity, okay, or funding opportunity announcement. You might hear FOAs. You might hear FOAs. A term that is starting to take hold here is NOFOs, or Notice of Funding Opportunities. These are all the same thing. Basically, it's the mechanism we use to advertise our grant opportunities, okay? They contain all the information you need to successfully submit your application. And we do, again, on that grants.nih.gov site, have a whole page dedicated to understanding funding opportunity announcements. But within those FOAs or NOFOs or whatever you want to, whatever we're going to call them here, you're going to find the opportunity description, participating IC, so which institutes and centers are actually participating on that particular opportunity. Key dates like your expiration date, your open date, your submit date, your due date. Award information, eligibility, submission requirements, review criteria, award administration, agency contacts. It's a long document. Read it top to bottom multiple times. That agency contact section is especially important, because if you have questions after you've read it, that's where you're going to go to figure out who to contact. Okay. We post all of these funding opportunities in two places. We post them in the NIH Guide for Grants and Contracts and in grants.gov. And grants.gov is a federal portal used by all of the domestic federal grant making agencies in the federal government. The NIH Guide and Grants and Contracts is specific to NIH and some of the partners that we service as well. So some of the other operating divisions within Health and Human Services. But each one of these sites has, very robust search capabilities. And you'll also find, subsets of our opportunities on institute and center sites, or things like our small business site. I recommend that you go ahead and you search in both places. So grants.gov, we talked about it being federal wide. So if you search in grants.gov, you may actually find some opportunities at other agencies that aren't NIH that you wouldn't have found if you went to the NIH Guide for Grants and Contracts. And if you go to the NIH Guide for Grants and Contracts, you may find additional information you're not going to find in grants.gov, because in addition to funding opportunity announcements, we post our notices. So these are things like policy notices, notices of special interest, changes to funding opportunity announcements, webinars, trainings like this one right here. So it's important to kind of go to both places there. We have multiple types of funding opportunity announcements. We have requests for applications, or RFAs, parent announcements, program announcements, or PAs, and notices of special interest. And we'll just briefly touch on each one of these, and then I'll point to where you can find more information. So requests for applications have a very narrowly defined scope, okay? They are programs that are developed within the institutes and centers. They have dedicated money, so set aside funds for these programs, and there's often a single receipt date. So if you see one of these that you're interested in, you're going to want to jump on that because it may not be offered again. Then we have something called parent announcements, and these are used for what we call investigator-initiated or unsolicited research. They don't talk at all about the science, really. It's really the mechanism and all the rules and all the associated logistics of getting in an application. They use a standard due date schedule. So we have standard due dates for many of our programs that have 3 submission, review, and award cycles a year. And we have the link here to our standard due dates table. And yeah, so these are our participant. Many of our institutes and centers participate in them, but it's important to look within that funding opportunity announcement to verify that the institute that you're interested in is one of those participating institutes. And then we have program announcements, and these highlight areas of focus. So they again are ongoing, typically up to 3 years. They use our standard receipt dates. Program announcements and parent announcements compete for the same funds. So they don't have set aside funds unless they are a PAS with set aside funds. Okay, so PAS is a program announcement with set aside funds. They follow our due date schedule unless, okay, they're a PAR, which has a program announcement with special receipt, referral, and review considerations. And I'm just going to pause here for a second because you're going to hear a lot of times, unless and depends, and sometimes and maybe throughout the next few days, especially when we're talking policies, because a lot of these things are nuanced. It's okay. Just take a deep breath, ask questions, and make sure you read the materials that we put in front of you, especially those FOAs. We have these things called notices of special interest, and this is not an official funding opportunity announcement. This is a notice that we put out that says, hey, we're interested in this area. We've got this initiative going on, provides the specifics to that initiative, and then points you to one of our official FOAs, typically a parent announcement, to actually get that application in. I have a quick little 5-minute video on that. If you're thinking of applying to one of these initiatives, I encourage you to go out and look at that. We have lots of grant programs at NIH. We have research grants, career development awards, institutional grants, fellowships, program project grants, conference grants, resource grants, all sorts of different types of programs. And we identify these programs by 3 character activity codes. So you are probably familiar or have heard of an R01. That's an activity code within our research grants. K01 is an activity code within career development. A T32 is a training activity code. F30 is a fellowship activity code, and so on. We have this page, type of grant programs, that talks about all of our different award programs. And actually on that page, we also have this handy link out to our research training page, which will help you identify programs by career stage. We have a whole session today at 4 o'clock on understanding NIH programs, and I encourage you to check that out. And also within our central resource exhibit halls, we have NIH program officer and training officer booths. So we have the opportunity for you to reach out to those folks there as well.
Okay, so what's the application process and how long does it take? Everybody wants to know, how long does it take to get a grant? Well, I'm going to tell you right now. Okay, but the good place to start is go to the grants.nih.gov page and click on the link that says Grants Process Overview. And this will provide a guide to you on the entire process, from getting started before you even put anything down on paper to when you submit it, and how to submit it, what happens during application, once the application has been submitted and it's being set up for review, and what happens after the review, and hopefully after you get an award. So the first thing you do is you need to plan. And the best way to think about this is to find on the FOA, find the receipt date and work back at least 6 months from that receipt date. So at least 6 months prior to the due date, you need to refine your research ideas and reach out to NIH staff. And then you need to put your research team together and an internal plan for carrying out your research. So how much time does it really take to write an application? Well, it varies for a lot of people, depending on how long you've been doing this and how new you are at it and how skilled a writer you are. But 2 weeks before the receipt date, I can tell you that's not enough time to do this. So if we look at the receipt date and we move to the left across the screen, or I'm sorry, across the screen, months before receipt date. So the first thing you need to do is assess yourself, your field, and your resources, and then start planning. So the planning phase could take anywhere from 1 to weeks to months. You need to brainstorm your ideas, and the most important thing you need to do once you have an idea of where you're going to focus is to call NIH program staff to get advice about the application process, about whether your idea is appropriate for a particular institute, and which grant mechanism might be most appropriate for you. And then you begin to outline your application structure. Once you talk to a program officer, figure out what grant mechanism you're going to do, then you can begin writing your application. And it's important you give yourself enough time to write it and then get some feedback from people that you trust to give you some feedback. They don't necessarily need to be a specialist in your area of science, but they need to be familiar enough with the scientific process that the application, when they read it, makes sense. And hopefully they're going to give you feedback. They're going to proofread it for you. You're going to edit it. But one of the most important things here, you have a receipt date. There's another set of dates that are going to be important for you, and those are the institutional deadlines when you're within your own research office. Most important thing to remember is you don't submit the application individually. Your institution submits it on your behalf. So you need to be on really good terms with your research office at your institution, because they have a lot of information and experience in doing this. Once you do that, you're going to be ready to meet the receipt date. So again, put together your team. I told you about the NIH extramural team. Well, you have your own team, and one of the team members is the AOR, authorized organizational official, or the signing official. They're the one that actually click the button to send your application to NIH. Then there's you and your colleagues, your principal investigator, directors, and collaborators or co-investigators. You have to work out the roles and the process and timelines for getting your application done. Then you need to prepare to apply. So you don't just do this willy-nilly. You actually have to register on with the NIH so that you can apply for applications. And your institution is probably already registered, but if they're not, it's going to take at least 6 weeks to complete this process. So once you've done that, then you confirm your funding opportunity and figure out what the submission method you're going to use is going to be. So there's several different ways that you can apply, but you have to access one of these ways. Prepare your application by pulling down the correct forms and using one of the submission options. You're going to submit through grants. Eventually, it's going to be in grants.gov, and then it goes to the NIH to ERA Commons, where you'll actually have your own page that's going to be assigned to your application. So again, some related resources, submission options to discuss that. So once you started writing the application, make sure you're using the correct forms. You don't want to use the fellowship forms for a research project grant, but the most important thing is to put together a strong proposal that addresses the review criteria that are listed in the FOA. So you're not submitting this blind, but you're actually submitting this, and you know how what the reviewers are going to use to assess the merit of your application. So, but most important, you need to read and follow all of the instructions in the FOA and the application guide. Again, we have resources for this on the website. And if you click on how to apply, it brings up this application guide. It looks something like this. Some of the stuff I've just covered, but now we're talking about the submission part. Now, this slide is just another way to say the 3 most important things that you need to do when you're preparing an application are read the instructions again, and then read the instructions. But you can read them in 3 different places, from the application guide to the FOA to the notice, and the notice in the NIH guide for grants and contracts. So these are very important because they're going to tell you, they're providing a roadmap for the process of submitting the application. Now, the other thing, we know what the deadline is for your applications. It's actually a receipt date. Now, times have changed. When I was a young investigator, graduate student, everything was submitted by mail. So FedEx made a lot of money. The post office made a lot of money on that. We don't submit anything by paper anymore. Everything is routed electronically. So they're routed through grants.gov to the ERA Commons. Now, since you know what the deadline is, you don't have to wait till the deadline to 5 o'clock on the day of the deadline. You can submit it days before. And the reason you want to do this is because the system actually allows you to look at the image of your application in the ERA Commons. And sometimes you find out that there's tons of typos that you want to correct. Things aren't in the places they need to be, and perhaps some required attachments or elements of the application are missing. So it gives you time to do that. So don't wait till the last minute. This is why it's also important to check your own institution's deadlines as well, because you need to work with them. So what happens once you submit it is it goes to an office in the Center for Scientific Review called the Division of Receipt and Referral. And there's a program, there's an office, a review officer there called a referral officer, and they begin to do an application check. Grant number is assigned. It's assigned to a particular institute or center that could be based on the science. that you proposed, or it could be based on what you've asked for in your cover letter. So once they've done that, they also assign it to an integrated review group. And in the integrated review group, there's a chief director for that IRG, and they are the one that assigns it to a specific study section that has the expertise to review your application. So after you submit the application, you can find the assignment details on your Commons page in the ERA Commons. That's about 2 weeks after, but it'll list a number of things, including the SRO who's going to manage the review of your application. Again, related resources, look them up. So what happens in peer review? So your key contact at this point is the scientific review officer. That person is named on the Commons page. The study section is going to review it for scientific merit. It'll be reviewed by at least 3 people, but it'll be assessed by the entire panel, which may be anywhere from 5 to 30 people. It'll be assigned a priority score and a percentile ranking that will be available to you in the ERA Commons. That'll happen 2 to 3 days after the meeting. And about a month after the meeting, also in ERA on the Commons, you'll be able to download the summary statement review of your application. So that's the peer review part. After that, someone like me, a program officer, becomes your key contact. Me and one of my colleagues in the grants management division, grants management officer, the grants management specialist. And we begin to look at the recommendation, or I'm sorry, not the recommendation, the assessment of the merit of the project in the summary statement. We make sure that all of the pieces that we need are there. So you may get an email that asks for just-in-time information. And then we begin to make an assessment about what's going to happen when we next. If it's got a very good competitive score or percentile rank, well, regardless, we begin to think about these applications in terms of the likelihood of funding. It may be highly meritorious and deserve immediate funding consideration, or it may be something that's in the gray zone. So I spend a lot more time talking to people with applications in the gray zone than I do with who are highly competitive, have highly competitive applications. Now, the most important thing is once this goes to council, we get additional funding recommendations. But the most important person in this process is the institute director, because the institute director is ultimately the one who makes the funding decisions about these applications. And if it's in your favor, then you'll receive a notice of award, and you'll see this process has taken about 9 months. And if you don't get a notice of award, if a decision is made that your application won't be funded, you contact your program officer and figure out what you're going to do. And often the suggestion is to try again. You spent a good period of time developing that application. So sometimes you don't get it on the first try. The notice of award is an important document because it's the legally binding document that explains both the terms, the award term, the amount of grant funds that you're going to receive, and any special terms and conditions. So once that is awarded, once that is issued, your grants office at your institution will set up an account for you, and you begin to work with them to use those funds to begin your research. So once you begin to draw money down from that award, that's when we know you've accepted the terms and conditions of the grant. The other thing that you'll be referred to is the grants policy statement, which describes the terms and conditions of all grant awards, but explicitly defines roles and responsibilities for all of you, your team on your side. So that is updated each fall. If you have trouble going to sleep, it's always a good idea. You know, I've suggested in the past that you pull down the grants policy statement to help you go to sleep, because it's kind of dry reading, but it is very important. So you need to know what the grants policy statement says about the grant that you've been awarded. And the other part of once you start doing the research, you're going to be asked to submit a research progress report annually. You'll also work with program to figure out what you do if you want to make any changes in your budget. If you want to add personnel that are key personnel or remove key personnel, those kinds of things require prior approval. These are the things that we monitor post-award, and it's done by both your program officer and your grants management officer or grants specialist. Again, another resource, post-award monitoring. So there you have it. It's that easy. The most important thing about this process is the only way to get a grant is if you apply. So if you really want a grant, you got to begin that process, and you got to give yourself at least 6 months to get the process started. And we have these related sessions. I'll hand it back to Cynthia.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike and Sherry, and thank you to all of you in the audience who are helping us out with some of those technical glitches. We have just a few minutes left. I want to say one thing here, and that is about how you can stay connected with a lot of the information that we are sharing with you. The grants.nih.gov website is chock full of information with links to our webinars. We don't connect in person very often anymore, but there still are some of our offices, like the loan repayment program and our animal welfare office, et cetera, do go to some of the larger conferences and do hold some live events. But you can also access Open Mic blog and our Extramural Nexus and get on the listserv so that you are getting those when they come out. The Nexus comes out monthly. Get subscribed, follow. There's so much out there for you to stay connected with what's happening. We had so many, Mike, Sherry, we had so many questions. I wish we could answer them all here. So I am going to, I think I have a time for a couple if we're brief with those. But just remember that we have several booths that are in the exhibit hall in the central resource room that are staffed today, tomorrow from 11 to 5 Eastern Standard Time. And that's ask an NIH program officer, ask an NIH grants manager, ask an NIH training officer. They're staffed. They're there to answer your questions. So let's go ahead and get to a couple of these that were the most asked, the most upvoted, because I said we were going to do that. So Mike, I think this should be to go directly to you. This was the number one question. My experience has been that most program officers prefer to have specific aims page before talking with you. However, you really need to be a little bit further along before you get to that point. So can you address the discrepancy on coming to a program officer early versus waiting until you already have your specific aims?
So the first thing you do is, once you've identified the FOA that you're going to apply to, is each of those FOAs lists a program officer contact or a program contact. That should help you identify at least a starting point. If you've done your research on Matchmaker or Reporter, that also helps you identify program officers of a particular institute. So their email contacts are there. Now, when you send an email to a program officer, once you've determined you have an idea that this is a good place to start, don't just send an email and say, I'd like to set up an appointment to talk to you about an application. That's not enough. You're going to waste time. So include in your email to that program officer, and you can explain how you got their name if you want. Somebody told me that you were the person that handled this program. Your name was in the FOA, et cetera, et cetera. But include at least a one-page description of the research you propose to do. Include a little bit of information about yourself, your department, your research approach, et cetera. That begins the conversation and say, and the receipt date that I'm looking at is going to be June 5th or February 5th or something like that of such and such a year. So you can begin that conversation. You can ask for either an appointment by phone or you can correspond by email. But the most important thing is to give us a break and provide that information with that initial attempt to contact us. And if you don't get a response within a day or two, it's okay to send it again. And then the same thing, I can tell you that my inbox is full, and it sometimes takes me more than 24 hours to respond to everything because I do have other duties. We all have other duties. So be persistent, don't give up, but set yourself up so that you can get a useful response. And that's by providing information in that initial email.
All right. So I know there's a couple that are people who are asking for clarification. Is it okay for them to reach out to you, Mike, and about what you just talked about?
Absolutely. That's what I'm here for today. I'm easy to find at NIH.
Okay, great. All right. So I apologize, but we are out of time. I do want to let you know that the PowerPoint, when you go and you get it from the section in the agenda, we have a lot of resources. The links that were included today in the presentation are all here for you. So go and get that PowerPoint, download it, add it to your swag bag, download it. And we thank you so, so much for joining us today and hope that we'll see you again over the next couple of days. Bye-bye.